2020 opened with a bang. First there was the fires in Australia, then the coronavirus in China, and now the locusts in Africa, which are now also threatening to enter China. Some are saying that God is punishing the people who are suffering these disasters. But is He really? What does the Bible say about it? Is someone really punishing the world? Hi, my name is Denise Grant, and today I want to share with you the results of some of the research we have been doing. My husband and I have been studying and researching what we call the Great Controversy, the war between God and Satan. And especially we have been researching the Tree of Life and the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. In a nutshell, what we have found is that the Tree of Life is a symbol of everything that has to do with God, who the God of life. And the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil is a symbol of everything that has to do with Satan. What we're going to share with you today is something very exciting because it's the first time that we have found in the Bible that Satan has admitted ownership of the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil, and it even explains and confirms our findings about what that tree represents. We are going to take you, first of all, back to Egypt to show you something there that is exactly what Satan is claiming in this place in the Bible. And so we can see through Egypt and through this place in the Bible that this is exactly what Satan has been doing on the earth. This is unheard of. For the first time ever, Satan claims ownership of the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. Egypt, a place of mystery and allure. Touted as the cradle of civilization, Egypt has been praised for its contributions to art, math, science, architecture, history, and religion. Since the age of the Enlightenment in the 1700s, Egypt has experienced an unparalleled renaissance, which has spilled over into our own modern society. Worldwide, there are over 100 museums and exhibitions featuring Egyptian artifacts. Egypt is being peddled to us as a place of great light and wisdom. But what really is the essence of Egypt? The Bible clearly connects the gods with devils, demons, the fallen angels who have been ruling the earth along with Lucifer. In Deuteronomy 32:17, it says that the children of Israel were sacrificing unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that had newly come up, whom their fathers feared not. Here we see a parallel between devils and the gods, clearly pinpointing the gods as being devils and demons. This little bit of information is extremely helpful because then, by studying the gods which humanity has worshipped through the millennia, we can understand how Satan and his angels operate in the world. One of the reasons we are so excited that we found this passage in this place in the Bible in which Satan admits that he is related to the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil is because throughout history he has claimed to be related to the Tree of Life. If you go to ancient Egypt, you will see that there are many symbols there of the Tree of Life, including the Crook's Ansata, which is the Ankh, which is a symbol of life, in which Satan claims to be connected to the Tree of Life and not the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. One explanation says that the Ankh is one of the most recognizable symbols from ancient Egypt, known as the Key of Life or the Cross of Life. The symbol is an Egyptian hieroglyph for life or breath of life. Many of the gods of Egypt are depicted holding the Ankh. The same article goes on to say that the Ankh is a cross with a looped top, which, besides the concept of life, also symbolized eternal life, the morning sun, the male and female principles, the heavens and the earth. We read on that, in carrying the Ankh, one was holding the key to the secrets of existence. The union of opposites, male and female, earth and heaven, and the extension of earthly life to eternal, time to eternity, were all represented in the form of the looped cross. The key to understanding this symbol of the Ankh lies in the concept of the union of opposites. Other words that have been used to explain this union of opposites are the words contrasts, duality, or balance, meaning the balance between two opposites. It's easier to understand the meaning of the symbol of the Ankh when we break down its components and show how opposites are united into that one symbol. One of the pictures of the Ankh we saw earlier contains two birds at the bottom of the cross. One is a dark bird, one is a white bird. On top of the crossing beam, there are two other birds. Again, one is dark and one is light. This is very intentional symbolism to emphasize a union of opposites through darkness and light, black and white. The opposites being referred to here are the opposites of good and evil, which takes us right back to the Garden of Eden, to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If we continue connecting the symbols, we must keep in mind that it was the serpent, that symbol for the devil and Satan, who was invested in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Good and evil, united into one symbolic tree, displays a union of opposites, but the tree of life displays no such union. Another symbol that might help us to understand this union of opposites is the yin and the yang, where white represents good and black represents evil. The Ankh, therefore, is a representation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and not of the tree of life. The yin and yang is also falsely called the tree of life, but because it has a union of opposites, it can only be the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We can further understand this concept of the union of opposites through one of the Egyptian goddesses, the goddess Maat. The goddess Maat can be best identified through a feather which she wears on her head. The feather is the symbol for the goddess Maat. Maat holds the Ankh, that union of opposites claimed to be the tree of life, in one of her hands. Maat also has wings. That's where the feather comes from, much like the covering cherub that used to cover the Ark of the Testament in Moses' sanctuary. The Oxford Companion to World Mythology says that Maat is the wife of Thoth, the god associated with wisdom. She is at once a goddess and an idea, the personification of moral and cosmic order, truth and justice that was as basic to life as breath itself. Pharaohs held small models of Maat to signify their association with her attributes. Maat gives breath itself, life, to the kings, and so is depicted holding the symbol of life, the Ankh, to their noses. Maat represents the proper relationship between the cosmic and the earthly, the divine and the human, the earth, the heavens, and the underworld. Maat was essentially in all Egyptian gods and goddesses as the principle of divinity itself. Maat might be seen as a principle analogous to the Logos, divine reason and order. Egyptologist Maulana Karenga writes that Maat is right order, divinely established order, and as such is the Egyptian concept of the arrangement and relationship that underlies and governs all aspects of existence, somewhat akin to the Western notion of natural law. Moreover, it extends from the elements of nature into the moral and social behavior of mankind. Maat as order is the principle which makes the whole of existence possible. At the same time, it is a life-generating principle and force. From everything we have seen so far, Maat supposedly represents wisdom. Pharaohs held a model of Maat to their noses to show their association with her attributes. Maat is supposed to give breath itself, life. It is an idea. It is a moral and cosmic order. basic to life as breath itself. Maat holds the symbol of life, the Ankh. Supposedly, it is the principle of divinity itself, the principle analogous to the Logos, which refers to Jesus Christ. Maat is supposed to be right order, divinely established order. It claims to govern all aspects of existence. Maat supposedly is akin to natural law. Maat affects the moral and social behavior of mankind. Maat is said to create order and to be a life-generating principle and force. These are claims which, if they were true, would connect Maat to the Tree of Life. However, the next excerpt clearly connects Maat to the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil instead. Anthony Holmes says the following about Maat. A feeling of rightness pervades the hall. The concept of divine balance flows from the complete one. Justice and order are the watchwords that Atum must maintain. Atum has appointed his daughter, the goddess Maat, to be the personification of this wonderful concept of balance in the universe. A feather, a simple plume, is her symbol. With the lightest touch, Maat controls the balance between opposing forces of good and evil to the finest degree. No individual human strength or weakness dominates for very long. The goddess applies her feather-light touch to restore divine justice and order in the ancient land. As we read these words, we must keep in mind that these claims of divine justice are really coming from the gods, and it's a type of satanic justice based on the opposites of good and evil of the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil, and not from God. The hall mentioned at the beginning of this last quote is called the Hall of Double Righteousness, where, according to ancient Egyptian mythology, the judgment of the dead took place. This is an image of the Hall of Double Righteousness, where a judgment of a deceased is taking place. Double righteousness, no doubt, being an allusion to the union of opposites of good and evil. The picture explains the different stages of the judgment. The person being judged here is Hunefer, an Egyptian scribe. At the first step of his judgment, he is seen pleading his case in front of all the gods of Egypt, who hold in their hands the Ankh, that symbol that represents the ethical law of good and evil by which he will be judged. In the next step of the judgment, the deceased is seen on the lower left, and first he goes through a judgment where Maat is presiding with the balances of good and evil. What's really happening here is that the heart of the deceased is placed on one balance, here on the left, and Maat, the feather, is placed on the next, so that the deceased's heart is weighed against Maat's sense of righteousness and justice. If the deceased has done good, then the balance with Maat goes down, and the deceased will receive eternal life. But if the deceased has done evil and his heart weighs heavier than the feather, then he will receive eternal punishment. In the case of this scribe, Hunefer, the feather is lower than the heart, which bodes well for him. Then he proceeds to the king, to Pharaoh, to receive the result of the judgment. Pharaoh sits on his throne, and in his hands he holds two things. Pharaoh is holding two symbols, and it is with these two symbols that we intersect with the Bible. Once we understand what these symbols represent, we'll understand how Satan has been ruling the earth for 6,000 years. We will understand what he means by his so-called divine justice, and how he keeps and enforces order and justice upon the earth. The symbols in question are the crook and the flail. The crook and the flail are more specific symbols which describe what the Ankh, that cross, really means. The crook and the flail represents Pharaoh's wisdom. It represents that idea, that moral and cosmic order, that principle that he uses in order to keep order. This is that principle that controls the moral and social behavior of mankind, and it's touted as being a life-generating principle akin to natural law. Before defining what the crook and the flail means, the viewer should realize the connection that Pharaoh has with the serpent. Pharaoh's head regalia is in the shape of a cobra who is ready to attack. Also, Pharaoh's goatee is not really a goatee, but the tail of a cobra. Pharaoh is completely taken over by the serpent, and everything he represents is related to the serpent. One definition of the crook and the flail states that the crook and the flail is symbolic of the respectable position of kinship. It signified pharaonic dominion over the land of Egypt. Both of farming origin, the crook symbolized that the pharaoh is the shepherd or the carer of the people, and the flail is the scourge of necessary punishment to maintain order in society. Together, usually held in both hands crossed on the chest, they are the most prominent insignia of the royal regalia of ancient Egypt that symbolizes divine authority. The crook and flail were symbols of the pharaoh, the ruling monarch in ancient Egypt. Knowing the original function of the crook and flail helps us see how they were used as symbols representing roles of the pharaoh. The crook was known as the heka in Egyptian. It originated from the staff, known as an awet, that shepherds used to protect their sheep. The crook represents the pharaoh's role as a shepherd in caring for the people of Egypt. The flail was known as the nekaka in Egyptian. It was a rod with 3 stands of beads attached to the top. Although historians cannot agree exactly what this was used for, there are 2 primary interpretations of its origin. The first is that it was a weapon used to defend a flock of sheep. In this interpretation, the flail represents the pharaoh's responsibility to establish the order through punishment if necessary, that was essential to sustaining society. The second interpretation, that the flail was used as an agricultural tool to thresh grain, does not fit the symbolisms involved in all that we have seen so far. When we take an overall look at all these symbols, we realize that Maat is the idea of justice according to good and evil, and that Pharaoh is the enforcer of that idea in the pursuit of keeping order. He enforces Ma'at by the symbols of the crook and the flail, which represent a reward and punishment system. A merit and demerit type of social justice which rewards the good and punishes the evil. Ma'at, then, is nothing less than our modern version of Lady Justice, who in one hand holds the balances of good and evil, and in the other a sword to execute judgment. If we look closely at the foot of Lady Justice, we will see that the symbol connected to her is none other than the serpent, bringing us full circle back to the Garden of Eden at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent is there, the union of opposites is there, good and evil. And now, through the crook and the flail, we know what that represents, a system of keeping order through reward and punishment. And reward and punishment is also a union of opposites. It is now that we go to the Bible, to that place where Satan claims ownership of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The place in question is the book of Job, chapter 1. Starting with verse 6, we read, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." The only way to truly understand verse 7 is to look at the Hebrew words in the ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible. The author of the ancient Hebrew lexicon, Jeff A. Banner, explains how the lexicon works. Hebrew was originally written with a pictographic script, similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs, but when Israel was taken into captivity in Babylon, they adopted the Aramaic script of the region and used it to write Hebrew. The modern Hebrew script used today is in fact Aramaic in origin, not Hebrew. All existing Hebrew lexicons of the Bible convert the vocabulary of the ancient Hebrews into a vocabulary compatible to our modern Western language. The greatest problem with this is that it promotes Western thought when reading the biblical text. In this lexicon, the mind of the reader is transformed into an Eastern one in order to understand the text through the eyes of the ancient Hebrews who penned the words of the Bible. With this in mind, we are going to look at the Hebrew lexicon meaning of the words from going to and fro and from walking up and down. So we click on the number and we open up the ancient Hebrew lexicon. And if you notice, the symbol by the number 1469 is a circle with a cross inside it. And the ancient Hebrew lexicon meaning of this word is scourge or whip, a whipping or lashing out at someone or something out of hatred or punishment. Now, if we look at the next words, and from walking up and down in it, and we open the ancient Hebrew lexicon, we read, the pictograph is a picture of a shepherd's staff, and the next pictograph is a picture of the palm of the hand. Combined, these mean staff in the palm. A nomad traveled on foot with a staff in his hand to provide support in walking, as well as a weapon to defend against predators or thieves. The staff is the equivalent of the crook, which is the shepherd's staff to lead the sheep. It represents goodness, beneficence, the carer of the people. Notice that when other symbols are added to these symbols, they may mean things like messenger, message, which immediately takes the mind to Lucifer, who was the covering cherub, the messenger of God. What we have here is a flagrant admission by Satan that he rules the world through the system of reward and punishment. So when we read verse 7, we can read, And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro the earth, punishing the people of the earth, and from walking up and down the earth, rewarding them. As you watch this video, you may ask yourself, what's the relevance of this to our time, to our days? What we need to keep in mind is that Satan created the system of reward and punishment as a rebellion against God's system of unconditional love. And as time progresses, he wants to prove that his system is more efficient than God's moral system of unconditional love and grace. Through the study of the goddess Maat, we saw how he claims that the principle of reward and punishment is the principle of divinity itself, a principle analogous to the Logos, that it is right order, divinely established order, governing all aspects of life and even akin to natural law, and that his moral principle of reward and punishment should control all social behaviors of mankind. It is true that all aspects of our human existence have indeed been governed by Satan's union of opposites, like the good cop, bad cop combo that work together to shape us up into order and correct behavior. And this is so because from the moment Adam and Eve chose to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they made a choice towards the system of reward and punishment. As human beings, we still have the same choice, and God is revealing to us this choice by contrasting his principle of unconditional love, as revealed through Jesus Christ, with Satan's principle of good and evil. But why is this so important, you may ask? It is extremely important because these two choices have two outcomes. These two choices place us either in God's jurisdiction or in Satan's jurisdiction. One is the jurisdiction of life and the other of destruction. Throughout the Old Testament, God has tried to show us what are the results of choosing to live by the gods and their principle of reward and punishment. Every time the children of Israel chose the gods over the only true God, they suffered disasters and calamities, which the gods inflicted on them, not God. The principles that applied then still apply today. And the principle is this: if we choose to live by the God's principle of reward and punishment, we will reap the consequences of that choice and will suffer the destruction that comes from the gods of reward and punishment. As I was studying my Bible this morning, it just hit me how what I was reading applies so much to what's happening in the world right now. I just happened to open to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, and this is what I read in verse 12 and onwards. And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place to myself for a house of sacrifice. If I shut up heaven that there be no rain. And immediately I started thinking of the fires in the Amazon and Australia. Or if I command the locusts to devour the land. Again, my mind went to the locust plague taking place in Eastern Africa right now, where millions are at risk of famine. The threat of 1 billion locusts sweeping across East Africa and South Asia, feeding on farms and fields, prompts urgent warnings. Or if I send pestilence among my people. And virtually the whole world right now is dealing with pestilence, with the coronavirus pandemic. If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. Now my eyes shall be open, and my ears attent unto the prayer that is made in this place. For now have I chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be there forever, and mine eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And as for you, if you will walk before me as David your father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, and shall observe my statutes and my judgments, then will I establish the throne of your kingdom according as I have covenanted with David your father, saying, There shall not fail you a man to be ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land, which I have given them. And this house, which I have sanctified for my name, will I cast out of my sight, and will make it to be a proverb and a byword among all nations. So there's a mechanism happening here. God says, as long as you are with me and keeping my judgments, my statutes, my commandments, my way of living, which is love, you're going to be safe. But if you go and start serving these other gods, you're going to be in trouble, not because I'm going to punish you, but because you've gone to another jurisdiction. And over there, these gods of reward and punishment are going to punish you. And then this house, which is high, shall be an astonishment to everyone that passes by it, so that he shall say, Why has the Lord done thus unto this land and unto this house? They're going to say God is doing this to them, when in reality, all God is doing is giving them their freedom. And once God gives you that freedom and He releases you, you have no protection. Not only are you left unprotected from Satan the destroyer, but from your own evil instincts as well as those of your neighbors. the carnage that will take place will be unfathomable. And it shall be answered. The reason this is all happening shall be answered, because they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, and laid hold on other gods, and worshipped them and served them. They're serving other gods. They're under the jurisdiction of other gods. Therefore has He brought all this evil upon them. Therefore God has allowed all this to come upon them, not because God is punishing them, but because God is giving them that freedom. So what's happening in the world that's causing God to give Satan more power over us? What are we doing that is causing Satan to have jurisdiction over us? Is it a coincidence that in 2020, China began fully establishing a social credit system, which is a reward and punishment system? The world has always operated by reward and punishment, but is it significant that now countries are fully adopting Satan's law of reward and punishment as the law of the land? And does this have a direct bearing on the tragedies that are happening in the world? Is someone punishing the world? Is Satan punishing the world because we are aligning ourselves with his system of keeping order? In the Bible, Egypt represents the system of the gods, the system of reward and punishment, and Pharaoh represents Satan, the enforcer of that system. The exodus from Egypt represents an exodus from the system of reward and punishment into God's system of unconditional love. Those that received the blood of the Lamb were not affected by the plagues that came upon Egypt, which the destroyer, the destroying angel, Satan, caused upon the Egyptians that did not have the blood of Jesus to protect them. This is the time to come out of her. This is the time to realize the very essence of Egypt is that violent system of reward and punishment, and to realize that this is also the essence of Satan, and that we are to come out from this violent system if we are to survive the things that are coming upon the world. The only place of safety at a time like this is in Jesus Christ, in His jurisdiction of unconditional love and grace. May the peace and grace of God be with you.